Good afternoon. It's David Selene and Chris Scully from Drive. And today we have special guest Marvin Baker with us. Welcome, Marvin.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Marvin works for a company called Solera. Now, what most of our audience and our attendees probably know is one of their holdings, which is Identifix. That's one of their popular brands. But Marvin, there's a lot more to Solera than just Identifix to help automotive shops out there in the economy right now. So, I'm going to give you the floor for just a second. Kind of tell us about yourself, your background, and then a little bit about Solera and all their offerings, because I know this is kind of the pre-thing before Expo. Solera will be at the Expo. They are have a lot of great offerings. So we're just going to kind of get the word out there so you can start thinking of the things that you want to talk to Marvin about when you see him at the Expo next week.
Thanks, David. So again, my name is Marvin Baker, and my expertise, I have about 30 years of automotive technology sales. And my father started our first facility in 1953, and that store still exists today in Mansfield, Ohio, doing quite well. So I've been with Solera 4 years, and Solera is an amazingly dynamic and large multinational company. I'm going to share a screen here for just a second. This screen basically shows the complexity of the whole automotive life cycle. And Solera actually has 77 automotive technology companies offering over 100 technology solutions. And you can see here on this slide, I won't obviously read it all, but here are all the facets of what makes the automotive market so complex and interesting for those of us in the technology world that are trying to tie all this together and have all this technology work efficiently for the end user. So that's high level what Solera does.
Okay,
Cool.
So when we talk about some of the key things that Solera has there, we know Identifix, which if you don't know about Identifix, I'll let Marvin talk about that for a few seconds. But you also have some other services like RedCap and data serving services and stuff like that. So take a few minutes and kind of expand the knowledge of all of our viewers of just a couple pieces, because I know you say 77 companies. We would probably spend a few hours on Facebook Live going through each one of those, Marvin. But
Right.
we'll leave that to you out on the expo floor next week. But we'll let you highlight some of the things. I know I've heard about them and talked to you quite a bit. But there's at LoJack, I know there's quite a different things that can help auto shops in there.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that Solera prides itself in is the totality of the depth and breadth of the offerings that we have to service the various aspects in the vertical markets that we serve, including obviously in this case the repair market. So as you said, most of our customers know us as Identifix, which we have about 86,000 customers currently in the US that use that product. Direct Hit specifically. And that company actually has a dozen different offerings. Direct Hit obviously is the core product that has the repair information in it. But in addition to that, we sell shop management systems. We sell, like you said, RedCap, which is a service that facilitates using the delivery services that are available in a given area to pick up and deliver customers, pick up and deliver parts, to just facilitate the transaction of helping customers. Additionally, one of the interesting things that you brought up that we had talked about previously, we also own a company called Spherion, which one of the products that it owns is LoJack. And most people, when they hear that term, I know myself included, thinks of, oh, that's the device that helps people find a car that's most likely been stolen. And that's how that product started out. But today, that product offers a lot more feature functionality than just that. Case in point of a couple of things that it does is that can be installed in a customer's car, and you can basically have the customer determine if he has children. As an example, say you've got 16, 17, 18-year-olds and you want to know if they drive outside of a certain area or they drive, over a certain speed, you'd like to be notified by that. It can do that. It does a lot of different things. It notifies both you and the shop of any service related items that needs to be done on the vehicle and so on and so forth. So one of the things that a lot of our customers, we're also focused on just, running our businesses and working in the business versus on the business, that I myself try to spend a lot of my time helping customers think about how they better work on their business to improve their overall business model.
Yeah, it makes sense there. Right before we come on the show today, Marvin, we were talking about, the tech shortages and everything out there going on. And you had a very interesting take from a partner in the industry with us out here when we started talking about most people needing techs and the thing that they're having a hard time finding them and anything. You came up with something that says, do they really need a tech? And I liked your analogy. I'll let you share that with our viewers today too.
Sure. So, one of the things in our experience, I myself, either personally or through one of the teams that I've been on, have serviced over 15,000 customers in the 30 years that I've been doing this. And I can tell you, whether it's in the collision market or repair or whatever space you're in, technicians tend to not be as efficient as shop owners sometimes think they are, because everybody's running around. They're busy, but are they efficient and effective? Those obviously aren't the same thing either. And so, yes, we clearly have a tech shortage that's dramatic in the market. But one of the questions that I always ask that sometimes surprisingly the owners don't know and don't think about is, how effective and efficient are your technicians? And so, a lot of shops have technicians that surprisingly are 50 to 100% productive, where I would say 100% is sort of like the baseline for what would be acceptable. Really efficient technicians are 200%. So like in our shop, all of our techs, as a baseline need to be 150 to 200% productive on an ongoing basis. So if however many techs you have, until they're all that level of efficient, then my comment or thought process would be that you need better processes and tools or training, depending on what the technician's particular issue is, to be more productive. And so, with that in mind, it's a question of, if all of your techs are that level of productive, can they even be more productive? And if not, then what needs to be done to facilitate that outcome? And I was saying a few years ago at NACE, which is National Auto Body Conference and Exposition in the collision market, there was a gentleman named Bernie Blankenstaff who had a great analogy that I have never forgotten. Obviously, this was probably 15 or 20 years ago, and it really stuck with me. And he basically said, if you think about all of your technicians as tile layers, the tile layer's job is to lay tiles. It's not to pick the tiles up from the store. It's not to transport them, unload them, reload them, inventory them, and do all the associated things. The only thing that tile layers should do is lay tiles. And if you think about technicians the same way, all of that's completely appropriate. The car obviously needs to be ready to be the work to be done on it. The parts need to be at hand, and all the paperwork is updated and completed and handed to them. And all of the tools and processes that are in place at that shop need to be as efficient as possible to facilitate the absolute best outcome. So while we all understand there definitely is a labor problem in most businesses in the United States, including the automotive industry, it's actually somewhat less of a problem in the average store than a lot of owners believe it to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And as I mentioned before we came on, that concept, that analogy that you're talking about is very well known in the construction industry. In fact, I have a good friend who runs a construction business. They specialize in outdoor hardscapes, paving stones, things like that. And he organizes his work crews exactly for the purpose of keeping his main bricklayer, for lack of a better term, just laying bricks while everybody else is there to support his activities. And the same thing absolutely applies to a shop and the technicians. The technicians have to be kept turning wrenches. And if they're turning wrenches and they're doing quality work and they're at the capacity that they could be at, right, then the shop will be profitable. The shop will run well. And if you don't have your shop in that condition and you try to add techs to that, what you're doing is you're adding bodies to a disorganized mess.
Right. You're actually making the problem worse.
Right.
Well, and I'm
Exactly.
just sitting there as I'm thinking, as I'm listening to everybody talk right here and everything, is that the thing is let's just break this down a little bit further for the shop owners on here. And why I want to break that down is what do we do that actually is inefficient or non-productive for our technicians when we're in the shops? Have them order parts, have them look up parts, have them run across the town and pick up a customer because the service advisor is busy, have them run out and oh, can you go talk to so and so out here so they can and try to see what's going on with the vehicle. And all those things are distractions in there,
And
and
here's
it can
another
be
one, shuffling cars around in the parking lot to get the next vehicle into the bay.
Right. That's a big time stealer.
It's a
Well,
huge one.
right. And in our business, particularly going back to direct hit for a second, for those customers that don't have a product for repair information, when I talk to shops or multiple shop operations, it is always surprising to me to hear them candidly communicate how much time their techs spend trying to diagnose a problem with a particular car. So we might have an idea, this is the problem, but that doesn't tell you what the fix is. So that's one of the things with specifically direct hit at Identifix that we excel at is with our confirmed fixes and also our tech hotline. For a very nominal fee, you can call up with the most complex problem of any kind of car you want. It doesn't matter, Mercedes or BMW, it doesn't matter how old, what kind of car it is. And they will basically stay with you and help you fix that problem until it's fixed. If that requires, the first, our correction rate for when people call to determine what a problem is and to fix it is about 67%, I think, on the first call. But if we have to make 2 or 3 calls, look up information, call the guy back, we actually even have a tool that allows us to see remotely where the tech is, listen to the car. A lot of times, for those of us who have worked on cars, we understand that the sounds that cars make are actually very relevant when you're fixing a car. You know how it's supposed to sound, and if it doesn't sound that way, that can tell you something. And a lot of the specialized technicians, we have about 50 dedicated repair line technicians that only work on the brand that they're familiar with. So if you have a problem with a Toyota, you would work with a guy who has 20 years experience working on Toyotas. And whereas you might not have any clue what might be particularly causing a problem, he'll be like, yeah, I fixed that, same problem, 3 times in the last week. And so, going back to a lot of shops do not charge maybe what they should for diagnostic work. That's one variable. But another variable is even if you do, it's like you got all this work backing up behind you. You want to get the car fixed and get it out of there. And you don't want to spend an hour or 2 or 3 trying to figure out what's wrong with it. I can tell you firsthand that regardless of the money in terms of charging the customer, that's frustrating for the tech. He wants to say, oh, here's a problem and here's the fix and I'll do whatever and move on to the next thing, not spend, hours trying to diagnose a problem.
That's a really good point. And I think it's true of anybody in any job. When you find yourself beating your head against a wall, there's nothing worse. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I've seen this so much in the repair world. I've seen this so much. You fight a problem in the shop, and you keep fighting it. You ask this person, you ask that person. So when you're looking at the inefficiencies into it, when you're actually fighting a problem in a vehicle that you can't diagnose, it's not just that one technician. Usually it's, hey, they go and talk to the other master technician. They talk to the owner. They talk to the foreman. They may have phone calls into the dealership. There's a lot of pieces that can go in there right now that are time killers when it comes to efficiency for your shop.
Well, yes. And the other issue is just ongoing training of all types for all people in various aspects of the business. Is that, as we all know, at least those of us who work on cars and fix them, the complexity of cars are ever increasingly higher and more surprisingly complicated. And the level of training that's required, not only access to the people who have knowledge, but the actual techs knowledge to work on the car, at a efficient level is ever increasing. And again, it's surprising to me how little training, borderline on virtually none, a lot of people who work on cars that do consider themselves professional have on an ongoing basis. And it's like, so having access to people who have the answers is important. Having access to the data is important, but also having the actual ongoing training that's required is important too. And again, I bring that up because that's another aspect of what we provide is, ongoing training on various, aspects of what's required to repair these cars. In our family, we talk about it all the time. Having been in business 70 years, it's like it's a little daunting and intimidating thinking about all the electric vehicles that are coming onto the market and what does it look like to work on those, and losing all of the revenue associated with all the service operations that we've traditionally done. The last time I checked, you don't change oil in a battery pack, and all the typical mechanical operations that we've done since Ford created the Model T. Those are all going away in the next 20 years.
Well, you brought up a big thing about ongoing training, and this is one thing I know at Drive, we've talked about it quite a bit, Chris, haven't we? Train your team, continually train your team, train them again, train them over, train them on what's new. But I just want to bring this up right now because Marvin said something at the beginning of that statement right there about being a true professional. And that goes for a lot of other industries, just other than the automotive, but the one that best I feel suits this. And I always relate technician and mechanicing kind of like a doctor. You got to go in and diagnose what the problem is. You got to go fix it. But, our doctors are expected to do continual education, stay up on the trends, see what the new medicines are, and do that. They have to be recertified. They have to do additional training all the time. But we don't necessarily always look at that like that in the automotive industry. We got a tech, they're doing good, they're billing good hours. Okay, well, why does he need training? He already knows it all. He knows what he needs to know. I don't need him to know anymore. That works for a while, but it does start to catch up to you as the vehicles change, the times change, the industry change. That will catch up to you, and it's something that when it does hit your shop, it's hard to catch up with the amount of training you have to do to get them back on top.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is that it goes to culture, and it goes from the owner down. You have to establish a culture of lifelong learning and that level of professionalism, that we're in an industry that's changing faster than most people would believe. And if the shop owners don't instill that culture into their shops, then they'll fall behind eventually. And they need the right tools, they need access to the right information, and they have to insist that everybody take advantage of it.
Yes, to your point there, Chris, one of the things that's interesting, you talked about culture. To me personally, and what I spend a lot of my time thinking about and trying to work with customers on is, when you talk about does a business have good culture or bad culture, or what is their culture like? There's like 50 different things that all relate to what kind of culture you have, to your point. But one of the things there is that if you are not constantly in the process of remaking yourself, in essence, what happens is the owner is constantly forcing the business to be remade, or external factors are forcing the business to constantly be remade. It's one of the two.
Right.
And I can tell you that my family, having been in business for 70 years, every 15, 20 years, you have to completely remake your business. People think, oh, if I get over this, I'm going to start a business and, in 10 years, I'll be good to go. In 20 years, I'll be better. Well, it's not a linear equation. It's like, everything is changing in a business at the same rate, more or less, no matter how long you've been in business. And unfortunately, some that have been in business a long time actually become a culture of complacency where they say, well, we're good to go. We bought all this equipment. And well, how old is your equipment? When was the last time it was updated? When's the last time you bought a new lift? And when's the last time you had your under four-wheel line, machine calibrated? And the list just goes, it's endless. One of the things that's so frustrating about owning a business, because, in my career, I've also owned my own business for 20 years, is that, what people that don't own a business don't understand, or people that never at least run one, is that everything can be perfect today and tomorrow it's broke again. That is the essence of why running a business is so difficult, and why a lot of people can't do it, and why some people do it for 5, 10, 20 years and then say, I've had enough. I don't have the ability anymore to deal with that constant change that drives me nuts.
Right. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, and that's a big thing on it is like, that's why we come in as a great fit with Drive, because we're there in the side of the corner, the shop owner, the business owner, help them, guide them through and make those changes that Marvin's talking about that happens every day. And I know every one of them, that everybody's listening to our show right now has probably had some kind of fire pop up this week, whether it be a small fire or a huge forest fire. You've had some sort of fire pop up in your shop you had to go out and handle. This kind of leads me to one of the things that I think is very big, and that is creating your guide for your shop, your what we call playbook, your playbook in your shop that actually leads you and your team to continually do this. But to me, a playbook it isn't a stagnant book. You can't just write it, put it on the shelf, and that's what you're going to follow tomorrow. Something's going to change and you have to update it. And if you don't update it, it becomes outdated and no longer usable. And the best one I can give, when I'm in my shop, we had a policy. We started off, we were really strict. No cell phones in the shop. Everybody put your cell phones away. No cell phones in the shop. My son started running the shop. I walked into the back of the shop one day and I see people on their cell phones. You can imagine where my temper's up. So I'm up in the front office, my son saying, let's go have a talk. He says, hold up a minute, pump the brakes, Dad. Pump the brakes, Dad. So I go over to the side and said, okay, show me what do you mean? So he goes, okay, watch this. And he goes up to the service desk, tells the service advisor, can you tell Tech One out there in the shop that his next vehicle will be here in 15 minutes? I watched the service advisor pick up their phone and text the tech. And I was like, okay. So then he goes, well, why don't you go out and see what some of the techs are doing on their phones? So I go out there, they're pulling up Identifix and repair information and everything else on their phones, and right there at the car. And I was like, okay, now what do I say? Got to go take that policy, and I guess we better rewrite it and say, you can use your cell phone if it's for work purposes.
Right. Exactly. Well, to your point, Dave, what I use the term blueprint, which in the collision business means something different, but basically, really it's just a business plan. But one of the things that I find that almost every business owner struggles with, either knowingly or unknowingly, is when you're a technician, your goal is to work on the business 100%. When you're a manager, I would say your job is to work on the business, in the business 80% and on the business 20%. And as the owner, in an ideal scenario, you would work on the business 100%. How do you improve it? How do you bring in more sales? How do you improve marketing? Does the front of the building look right? Is it clean? Are your people trained properly? Are they dressed properly? Are we making the profit that we need? Are our hourly rates right? What is the tech efficiency that we're dealing with? Do we have the right level of inventory? Are we dealing with the right, vendors? I could go on and on and on. And as the saying goes, if you don't know the answer to those things, that's a problem. And I find that a lot of shop owners, no matter how long they've been in business and no matter how sophisticated they are or they perceive they are, even if they're a multi-shop operation, a lot of times they don't have those answers. And, like the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know. And so I find, being in the technology world, a lot of people are sensitive about what technology costs, which I understand that. But, one of the sayings that I have is that, tools are cheap and people are expensive. So back to, I need to hire another tech. Well, what could we do instead of hire another tech? Even assume that you have, 5 techs and they're all 150% productive. Is your layout the best? Are your tools the best? Is your lighting good? Follow your people around for a day and say nothing and watch their body language. How many times do they move parts from place to place, or a cart, or this or that? I mean, if you actually start looking at that, if you've never done it before, you start to see how much wasted time and motion and energy there is a lot of times that don't need to be that way. It could be because your building layout, it could be because the tech himself, or parts. Anybody that's in the automotive business right now has a daily reality that their parts is a pain. If you're just doing things as simple as changing the oil and brakes and tires, it's less so. But even then, it's like, if something's back ordered and you can't get a fuel filter or an air filter, I drive a 2018 Honda Accord, and every time I go in and have the oil changed, I'm amazed that it's like, well, we don't have an air filter. How can you not have an air filter for a Honda Accord? Are you kidding me? I'd say 3 out of 4 times I go in there to Valvoline, they don't. Another aspect of what Solera does is everything to do with parts procurement, parts management, and every aspect of parts, whether it's new or record or remanufactured or used or whatever it happens to be. It's like, well, where are those parts? Are they available? How many days away from us are they? And again, obviously different businesses, specialize in different aspects of repairing vehicles, but the more you get away from that traditional, oil and brakes and gas, tires, into the more complex aspects of repairing a vehicle, the more you are critically tied to parts and their availability to you.
That's a big point because a lot of people efficiency can get pulled up on parts. And as I said, you got to work with your parts vendors, but also have the technology in place to know what you're looking for. And I know that's something Solera does offer to help with. So definitely reach out to Marvin at the expo and see what they have to offer. Because I was blown away. I honestly met Marvin several months back, and we sat down and started talking, and I seen Solera Identifix, and I was like, I know exactly what Solera and Identifix is. And you can, to this day, I still don't know everything Solera is because they're such a great powerhouse in the automotive industry.
Well, and to your point, Dave, I've worked here, like I said previously, 4 years, and I'm quite sure I don't know everything we do. I mean, literally every day I'm like, I find myself thinking, I didn't know we did that. I mean, our tagline as a company is titling to totaling and 56 touch points in between. So, I mean, the only thing we do not expressly have some technology that's involved with is in manufacturing the car. We do not involve ourselves in tier one manufacturing. So the actual, process of creating the vehicle for the manufacturer. But after that, we have technology and software and tools and solutions that touch every aspect. I mean, if you've ever went somewhere and got an RO or a parts order or had somebody bring parts, I mean, just any aspect of what is involved in repairing the car, we do that or provide some tool or solution that touches that.
Okay. Now, just a few minutes ago, I am going to back up just a little bit because Marvin, you're talking about being the owner, being 100% working on the business. And for all of our viewers that are not 100% working on the business at all times, I'm going to give you, and I know Chris and I have talked about this many times on our shows. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go next time you're in your shop, next day you open, from the minute you walk into the shop to the minute you walk out, I want you to carry a notebook with you. And what I want you to do is write down everything you did. I had to turn on the air compressor. I had to turn off the lights. I had to move this part. I had to do this. I had to order parts. I had to talk to the technician. I had to work on this car. What I want you to do is write every action you do down in this book, and then put the book away for a day or two and come back to that book. And I want you to read through it and see how many of those actions was something somebody else should be doing in the shop or somebody else could be doing in the shop other than you as the owner, if it's in the day-to-day operations.
Well, and not only that, but as importantly, I would argue more importantly, how many of those things that you observed being done or did yourself in that day shouldn't be done at all by anybody? It's actually alarming when you start looking at what people do and what they take as normal and acceptable and reasonable in their business. And, I guess one of the things is when you've been in as many different businesses and locations all over the country as I have, you learned a long time ago that there is no such thing as normal. There's normal for that shop and for that culture, but there is no such thing as normal. And so the level of automation, I'll give you a case in point. I was in a store the other day, I forget where it was, and all of the switches everywhere in their store, all were light sensor. So no one ever had to turn the lights on or off anywhere. You walk in the bathroom, they turn on. You walk out of the bathroom, they turn off. And every light in the whole place was like that. And I was actually really impressed because that's the first place I'd actually ever been at that was a shop that was like that. And I talked to the guy about it, and that's exactly what he said. I mean, not only does that save, I actually was in California now I think about it. It was in California. And he's like, not only do we want to save the energy, number one, green initiative. Two, we don't want to pay for it. And three, we don't want anybody to screw with it. I don't want to be like to your point, at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, going around turning all the lights off or whatever, when we're done, walk out the front door and go home, and so there's just so many things that are like that. I mean, if you're physically moving stuff because it's in the road, that's a problem. And there's about 50 different things that when you actually, if you go to somebody else's business, which is surprisingly, again, how many technicians or owners of businesses don't go or have never gone to other stores and see what they're like. And what's interesting is when you do that, you see things that you would have never thought about or had a perception about in your own business. And you're like, oh, well, that was a smart idea. I never thought about doing that. And so it's not so much that, people that are supposed experts or consultants come into a business that they are so smart. It's just that they have seen a lot of different things. And when they come in your business, they have a fresh set of eyes and they're not used after, 8, 10, 20, 30 years of seeing the same four walls. So they look at that and they say, well, for a case in point, I bring up lighting. Lighting is a big deal. I would say 2/3 of the businesses that I've been in are underlit. That you can't see well. And so it's like, well, what kind of lighting is there in the business? When's the last time the bulbs were changed? Is it the most efficient kind of lighting? Is it at the right height? I mean, I could spend, hours, at least 4 hours in a typical facility doing a light analysis of what, what change needs to be changed in that regard. And so on and so forth.
Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about here, Marvin, but we are coming up on our half-hour mark of our show. So what I want to tell of our guests, look, we're going to have Marvin and many other people there at our expo next week. It kicks off on Thursday. We're looking forward to seeing each and every one there. Come and stop by the Solera booth, talk to Marvin. He'll be more than glad to give you ideas on what you got, what's going on in your shop, what Solera has to offer, and help your shop go to the next level. And that brings up that next week's show. Chris and I will be live from the expo floor. So it's going to be an interesting week next week. A lot of excitement out there. We look forward to seeing all of our shop owners that are coming to the expo, and all of those that couldn't make it. Well, we're sorry, and we really want to see you there, but stay tuned and we'll bring the expo to you on Facebook Live.
Thanks, Dave. And I would just like to leave everybody with the thought that at the end of the day, I don't think of Solera as a company that sells software. I think of us as a company that likes to focus on helping customers fix their pain points. So I would just challenge everybody that's coming to the expo next week to write down and think about clearly what are the top 3 pain points that you have either personally or in your business relating to your business that if you could wave a magic wand, you'd like them to go away. And that's what I'd like you to bring to the booth, and what we can talk about, how we can make your quality of life better, how we can make you more money, and how we can, when you get up in the morning, you're not frustrated over the same thing over and over again.
Great.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you for joining us today, Marvin, and everybody have a great weekend. And we look forward to the expo next week and seeing you on Facebook Live from the expo.
Thank you so much.